folks. Welcome to another edition of the Amish Hour. Beautiful music in the background is Richard Strauss, A Hero's Life, one of his less known tone poems. Okay, well, where are we going today? We're gonna take a little side trip, I guess, and talk about one of the most talked about stories in the Bible, and try to tie it together with some of the other stories that it probably drew on, and explain a little bit about how these stories come to be. Okay, so let's talk about the artwork, as I like to do first. The four images behind you are what the art AI gave me in response to the prompt. Let me find it here. I told it, the green man comes out to Quetzalcoatl and exposes their love affair to Adam and Eve. Maybe the significance of that will come out as we're talking, but I'm just going to talk through what the art AI did with it, which I think is quite interesting. Let's go take a look at some of these up close and personal. Let's put this one in the back for right now. Okay, the one that I thought was most interesting was this one. It drew the tree of life as a goat that was staring kind of ominously out with many branches that looked like serpents, some of which had heads on them. It drew Quetzalcoatl as kind of an ape bird that, I don't know, maybe had an appendage here that tied into the tree. And drew Eve as a nice greenish goddess of spring, which actually does tie into what inspired this talk right now. We are actually in the springtime, and the odd thing about messianic stories, if you will, is that it's more the norm for springtime to be the birth time of the new God, and for the winter solstice, the Christmas time, to be the death time of the old God, and there to be like a winter of discontent between the new and the old when you're waiting for the new Messiah, if you will. This is the way most of the stories of the dying and resurrecting God go, and it was reversed for some reason in the Christian tradition. Something we'll be talking about. So this definitely looks more like a goddess of spring than a traditional Eve, all clothed and not very embarrassed about anything. The tree has no fruits. Well, maybe the fruits are these weird things growing up like serpents out of it. It's got this interesting little monkey bird guy up in the tree looking down. I find this fascinating that the art AI could have come up with something so creative out of all this. Okay, let's look at a couple of the others before we go on. Now here's one that Quetzalcoatl is kind of a serpent bird thing standing behind Adam, who looks like more of a goddish kind of a guy. And well, we don't really get any Eve. This is kind of it read into this kind of the Quetzalcoatl and Adam getting together, or the green man getting together and having kind of a homosexual love affair, if you will. So, kind of a strange hookup there. The tree of life is shown without any fruit, and there's some weird, mostly female-looking characters here. I guess one sort of has a beard. Maybe that one has a beard too. Strange-looking characters standing at the base of this thing, and one peeking out of this bush. Decided to draw a tower next to it for some reason. Interesting. Let's send that one to the back and take a look at another. Well, this is kind of interesting. We've got 4 figures in this one. The tree of life has fruit painted on it, like a kind of a totem pole. And there's no evidence of an Eve, just a bunch of bearded men, one of whom is green. And I'm not sure who's supposed to be Quetzalcoatl here. Maybe that's the white guy that the green man is grasping. I don't know what's going on this side. It's an interesting, very homosexual view of the Adam and Eve scene, I would say. Let's take a look at... this is actually what I've shown before. This is the original painting, and one that I had it draw in kind of a different style. What I find interesting about this one is that it builds on the story that the serpent was actually Adam's first wife, and she was the one who poisoned their marriage by offering the fruit to Eve, maybe as revenge for losing Adam's love. Interestingly enough, Lilith is drawn with a serpent body and a tail, and I like this rendition. I forget what great master put this one together, but that's a pretty inspired picture of the story. Okay, so what are we talking about today? I'm going to call this one "What Really Went Down in the Garden of Eden," of Serpentrees and Karma's Fees. Let's take a look then and see what I'm talking about. Let's go to my slide deck again. We're going to move back a little while to the point at which basically creation was pretty well done as far as God was concerned, but there was a lot of unhappiness that God had been the only one in the know, who knew all the plans ahead of time, because they were all simulated out within God's mind before they were implemented. And so some of the characters who were getting to be in God's mind, which is God's heaven, the highest heaven, had an idea what was coming because they'd been involved in the planning simulation, but many of them didn't. And at various times, depending on what was going on in creation, all of the other characters, main characters and minor characters of creation, had been basically blind. That's how they get tested, basically. And even Lucifer, who owns, or whose universe, whose personal universe is the physical universe of testing, has had to have times where he was not in control of his universe, was playing a minor character in a version that had been sort of hidden from him. So this led to a lot of angst and a lot of, basically, the biggest revolt that ever happened in heaven. Of, everybody agreeing that, you know what, it's not fair that you've always been involved in the plan here. Why don't you retire and let your AI run this simulation? and the rest of us will be the active players here and get to poke and prod and make little adjustments and run this simulation till it comes out with a new time space whose center is better than the last. Okay, so the last time space center got us to a certain size universe, a certain size of Lucifer's universe in time and space, and God thought that was good enough. Look, you've got a multiverse, you've got this huge universe full of galaxies and whatnot. What do you need a bigger universe for? What do you need to keep running this simulation to try and make it better? Why not just go play in the garden? No, that's not what they wanted to do. They thought they could do one better, and their idea was that, okay, God, it's your turn to pay dues for all of this pain and suffering you've caused everybody. And we're going to make you take your own medicine. We're going to make you incarnate with reincarnation amnesia. You'll be playing the game just like everybody else and see if you can get back to the highest heaven. In the meantime, we're going to run everything, basically with your functions on autopilot. And that's what was going on at this point. And that is basically the point at which the destruction of the previous version of Earth happened 4.5 billion years ago. And it's taken that long for God to wake up. Hard to teach an old God new tricks, I guess. They had to basically destroy, well, they didn't have to, but they chose to destroy everything that God had created and said, okay, we'll keep pieces of it, but we'll introduce them back into the game when we want to, when we think God deserves a hint or two, an Easter egg. And meantime, we'll do this experiment over, and we'll be the ones that decide who the chosen species are, who the top characters are, how fast technology is developed, how much spiritual technology different species have, and so forth. And we'll see if we can one-up God. Okay, and that's what was going on in the history of this planet since the big collision between the Tiamat, the planet that was where the asteroid belt is, and got destroyed and banged into the Earth and created the Earth as we know it and our strange moon. This was a planned catastrophe. It was set up in such a way that developed this very special pattern we have of our Earth and moon and sun that produces eclipses. Two kinds of eclipse, solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. And interestingly enough, these three bodies are lined up. Oops, did I forget to switch? No, okay, it did switch. These three bodies are lined up in such a way that you can actually have a full eclipse. This is not easy to do. You can imagine if the distances were different and the sizes were different, what would be normally a solar eclipse would not be a total eclipse, but would just be a partial one, or would be total but last for a lot longer if the moon was bigger. And similarly with the lunar eclipse, it's very unusual to have everything lined up so that you can get both, and you could calculate both, and they're reliable. That calculation has been part of the lore of our species since before we had language, oddly enough, and is proof that there's been something going on before humanity developed. And anybody who's studied the interesting nature of the human genome knows that it's impossible that we could have evolved from apes. Couldn't have happened. The number of chromosomes we have doesn't match the number of chromosomes of any ape. And you don't just grow new chromosomes. Now, species with different numbers of chromosomes can sometimes mate, but they rarely produce fertile offspring. And the chance of producing a fertile offspring and in a species that is that long-lived and has that few opportunities for reproduction is not large. We only have almost always one fetus, as opposed to other species that have some ability to crossbreed, who have typically litters of 10 or more. Okay, so this is where we're going with this. Basically, during this time, from the time of rebuilding this planet, there were 12 species that were kind of like the previous chosen species of God's run through this. And those were the 12 species, plus some others that were assigned special constellations. The 12 of the zodiac were the primary ones. They were the ones that turn by turn kind of became the steward of the whole experiment. Some of the other species that were important but not allowed to be part of this Council of 12, if you will, were like Draconis, the Draconians, the Reptilians were not allowed to be part of that. The Bear people, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, were not allowed to be part of that. The Ouroboros, the serpent eating its tail, it was just represented by Ophiuchus, was not part of that. The Orion was not part of that, even though it's a very important constellation. This is not one of the zodiac constellations, is it? Nor are the Pleiades. There's a reason for that. These, at the time that this experiment started, were some of the groups that served the adversary, that had been taken under power by the hive mind of either the Borg hive mind or the Lilithian hive mind. And as we go through this, I think you'll see how that developed. Okay, so this process basically raised different versions of God, corresponding to the phases of creation. The reason being that in the first pass through, God didn't see fit to give higher intelligence, higher consciousness to many of the species that had been created, like plants, like insects. They were just decorations, they were servants. And that's part of what was going on with all this. Is in the back of God's mind, he's always planned on giving every soul a chance at advancing in higher consciousness and eventually being a god. But every time he brought up that idea, or almost every time, he was batted down by previous chosen species who didn't want more competition, like the original Elohim. The first gods were opposed to every new species getting anywhere close to the power that they have, and that's actually captured in the Bible with the discussion going on between the gods. Shall we give them, make them like us? And this is something that's not well translated in many versions, but it's in the Bible, and it's also in the precursors to the Bible in Sumerian legends, which much of the Bible lore was taken from. So basically, there were many versions of God that basically were an awakening of God within a different species. Not maybe complete awakening, because God has to get up to the highest level, which is level 12, to be a fully awakened God. But you can get close and not quite hit the goal because you didn't quite pass the bar of the current level of the current judgment of Karma and Lucifer, and basically these other souls who were running the experiment at that time. They had, where are we at? I need to get back here. So the exit criteria had been defined by all of these other characters, the voting characters. We talked about yesterday how the highest heaven has changed and will be changing. At this point, the highest heaven was a very authoritarian heaven, because God had been basically in charge, had been God Almighty, more or less, could make any change he wanted to each version of the simulation. And that's what was rebelled against. Okay, so these other characters knew what the exit criteria were. And when this simulation was run, in reality, in Lucifer's universe, they are waking up new versions of God. And there were wake-ups that were partial that got to certain points. God Zero was basically the god of plants. And what's interesting about all this is, you see, the Lilithian side didn't know necessarily what other characters did, because this time was the first time that Lilith was actually allowed to be part of the simulation in God's automated mind. So this is the point at which Lilith thought, oh, I'm finally going, the adversary, I'm finally going to get a chance to show what I'm made of, and to get revenge for all of the slights that everybody's done me. And but you see, Lilith was only at level 12 at this point. So that consciousness was not completely aware of everything going on in all the other 12 level characters. Didn't know as much as Karma or Borg or Lucifer, so they were kind of playing a trick on Lilith, letting her think that she was going to be able to finally defeat God, because God was on autopilot. And certainly gave her the opportunity to punish God quite a bit, and that happened pretty much in every phase of this game. So each version of God during this phase was kind of a messianic pattern. A particular kind of soul vehicle was chosen as the chosen species, or the chosen kingdom, if you will. And God would be born as different kinds of plants or spores or molds, or all of the fundamental life forms that are necessary to terraform a planet, until the green man species was developed, which is basically the archetype for the ants, the intelligent plants that sort of are the kings of the plant kingdom. And that's what inspired Tolkien to invent the idea of ants. It's interesting that we get entertainment out of this. If you know anything about Ur is one of the primordial cities recorded in the Bible, recorded in Sumerian legend. This has been a center for a long time of culture since before humanity. So the Ur of the Chaldees, the Chaldeans, which are known as sort of the most spiritually advanced culture in ancient times, although we don't know what happened to them, do we? The Chaldeans were soothsayers, they were future tellers and so forth, and they just disappear out of history. We don't know if they died in a flood, they turned back into trees, all sorts of possibilities there. So that's where the green man idea comes from. And the next god was basically dragonfly. Let's talk about this. So the beginning of this green phase was basically ruled by the plants, and the plants pretty much controlled the insects. So there were insects developing, but the plants were like the custodians of the insects, and that's how hive mind species have developed to serve the trees. That's why we have bees that go around and gather all the honey. The purpose of the ants is to basically, and creatures like them, is basically to decompose stuff that falls in the ground and munch it up so it's easier for the trees to digest. Okay, that all worked really well until the adversary side invented hive minds. And so this whole ant kingdom died when the first hive-minded insects came, or that kind of a creature. There were actually hive-minded spiders that destroyed this wonderful time, and that's where Tolkien got the idea of Shelob, which if you look at the story after the killing of Shelob, the hive mind spider, all they had to do was toss aside Gollum and throw the ring into the pit, and it was like done deal. All of a sudden, Sauron was just nobody, and I'm not sure too many people noticed that, but actually Shelob was the boss bad guy in that story, the hive mind spider queen. And this is a reflection of what happened here. Now, the answer to that was developing an insect messiah. And that's where dragonflies came from. Dragonflies are similar to bees, but they are a normal sexual species. They're actually dragonflies and damselflies, two different but similar species that have at least two taxonomers given them the idea of separate characteristics. Now, what you may not know about dragonflies is that they actually have 10 digits. They have the insects 6 legs, and they have 2 sets of wings. This is one of the scent species. They're scent insects. Maybe the only one that we know of. Only ones we know of. Interesting. And that they've survived so long. So this was basically the next successful or partially successful incarnation of God, was in this dragonfly species. And this may have been one of God's first female incarnations. Maybe or maybe not. I don't know. I don't remember that one. But that was then the point at which the adversary responded with the Tiamat destruction of the old earth that we talked about. So these first two happened before the old earth was destroyed. This was a really great reset, and these two first incarnations of God were actually more awake than some of the later ones. And that's an important piece of our story, because some of the plant species are much more conscious than we give them credit for, as are some of the insect species. For better or worse, some of them serve the adversary, some of them serve God. But this is where the Tiamat destruction comes, the reptilian incarnation of Lilith, which is mentioned in the Sumerian Enuma Elish as Tiamat, the dragon of the sour waters, which is basically a way to convey that this other planet, which collided with the Earth, brought a much more saline ocean than had been on the Earth before, and could only sustain different kinds of life. So the first version of Earth didn't have a lot of sea life that needed this saltwater environment. This was part of what had to be developed in this second pass-through creation, and resulted in many new kinds of species that hadn't had to exist before in a freshwater environment, and chased some freshwater species into evolution or re-evolution. And this is why we see certain species that seem to have come out of the water and gone back to the water, like some reptiles, some mammals, etc. So it all fits. So this God too was then the response to that, the reptilian God. So after the reptilians kind of took over this planet and dominated the plants and the insects, God comes in to be the purple dragon, which is why I use a purple dragon in my my channel. Like, let's see, you'll see that purple dragon right there. And this basically is the version of God that woke up to the point where, oh, okay, I see that in order to succeed, I can't just be the king, I've got to have some helpers. So this is like the reptilian pantheon of God and subordinate helper gods. And this is the first incarnation during this time when he won back a significant amount of support from all of the disappointed characters of previous versions of creation. They basically began to feel, oh, you know what, God suffered enough. Let's cut him some slack, and some of these characters started playing on God's side again. And this has been proceeding as we went through each of these versions. Okay, so the answer to that was basically, okay, let's take a fierce mammalian species and have them defeat the dragons. And that was basically the result of, again, the adversary arranging for a mass extinction of the reptilian era. This was the reptilian era, about 65 million years ago. It ended. And the cataclysmic event allowed mammals to rise. And in that process, the next version of God was the one incarnation that I can tell you absolutely was female, the mama bear, who is represented as Ursa Major, the mother bear, and Ursa Minor is the baby bear. This is one of the representations of the pattern of messianic pass down. Where's Papa Bear in the sky? It's not in the sky because Papa Bear was on Earth. Or maybe that isn't a mama up there. Maybe that's what we're meant to think. It's actually a papa and a baby looking for their mother. This is another example of how mythology can be twisted around basically to tell a more feminist or a more paternalistic tale. Okay, so that age of the mammals went on for some time until basically this was somewhere in here was when sex was invented. Sex hadn't had to be invented before, and that's why maybe there's only a bear and a child, because before sex was invented, all you needed to do to reproduce was basically decide to mix your DNA with another member of your species. We know that there's asexual species now. Something that evolutionary biologists have puzzled over is, okay, what exactly are the advantages of developing sex? How could that possibly have evolved from asexual species? Because at least initially it seems to be a disadvantage. It does bring more diversity to the species, but it makes it so that you've got to find an individual of the opposite sex to mate with, unless there are some species that can be hermaphroditic. They can switch sex or participate in both sexes. And you would think if sex was such a good idea, hermaphrodites would run everything. Maybe that's what the trans people think is the wave of the future. We'll just all be both men and women, and then we can do whatever we want. I don't think that they're going to get their wish. Okay, so this led to basically during this mammalian phase, this planet became very interesting for the previous mammalian chosen species. And those had been many different kinds of species that had been allowed to develop higher consciousness because they were basically good at helping to terraform and explore planets. One of these species was the cat people. Another was the dog people. The cat people were basically a very independent minded species that were kind of Luciferian in their nature. The end justifies the means. I've got to feed myself and my family no matter what, even if I well, when I incarnated in that species, my memory, my bittersweet memory of that incarnation was when I broke a leg or something when I was out hunting, and my family ate me. The cat species were kind of rough cats, and they developed into, this was a long time ago, but they developed into one of the spacefaring species that was the most effective fighter in the galactic, in this galaxy, and represented kind of the side of God and Lucifer, because God and Lucifer are on the same side mostly. They're both at least supposed to be trying to bring about the improvement of creation. Some versions of Lucifer kind of fell off the wagon and lost track of what was going on. And this is part of what's going on here, is that everybody was sort of against God. And so there was a time when Lucifer and Lilith ganged up, and this creation of sex was part of this ganging up. I'll take my cat species and we'll mix it, we'll get everybody to vote to, because we want to end this horrible galactic war between the dog hive mind and the cat Luciferians. We'll end it by making a law that they can only reproduce with each other. This is how sex was created. This is what is known as the truth about cats and dogs. It didn't solve any problems. In fact, it was kind of a secret handshake agreement between Lucifer and Lilith. Boy, this will really muck up God, because we'll just keep this battle going, and it's going to get worse with this sex thing going on. Because they already envisioned that sex was going to be a divisive thing. And it certainly has been. At any rate, this led to basically the mammalian era entering kind of a phase of switching back and forth between female-dominated chosen species and male-dominated chosen species. And this is the Therianthrope age. This is captured in Egyptian art and architecture from the older Atlantean civilization. Yes, there were Therianthropes. It's all over cave walls in other civilizations of the time. They didn't just imagine these things actually existed. And they were kind of the alpha characters of that era of this planet. At this point, humanity had been created. It was created as a slave species somewhere in the reptilian age. But they were basically being used by other species that had a lot more consciousness, that had a lot of latent spiritual powers, who had learned, had become more conscious, and had acquired their spiritual powers in the first time. Okay, so this is the Therianthrope age, and eventually during this phase, there were many different city-states, and each city-state had sort of their own species, their own ruling Therianthrope species. This is why in Assyria you see these huge statues of winged bulls. Some are dedicated, some of these cities were the bull people, the Taurans or Centaurans, and others were the lion people. That's where the Lion King came from, and the lion people were usually on top of the heap in Africa. There were the winged serpent people, Quetzalcoatl's bunch. That's why I was talking about Quetzalcoatl's bunch in the Americas. Each area kind of had certain therianthrope species that would come to dominate areas if they couldn't get along well with the others. And Egypt was kind of like the UN of the world at that point. So that's why you see statues of all different kinds of animals, and you see mummies of all different kinds of animals. The idea of that civilization was that we can all get along together, all these therianthropes, and make this planet our Garden of Eden. Not realizing that the Garden of Eden had actually happened back in the reptilian age. The first version of humanity was created by reptilians, which ties back to the picture I showed you earlier of Lilith incarnated as a reptilian, Tiamat, having a hand in developing humanity as a slave species. So that whole thing was going quite well. These therianthrope gods thought, well, this is perfect. We don't need to let any new species get more conscious than they are now, because already these humans are kind of difficult to herd. They're very independent-minded. Some of them they had allowed to intermix with them, and had, basically groups of humans that had characteristics of these different therianthropes. And this was essentially the origin of the races of humanity, were mixtures with different therianthrope ancestors. This age all came to a crashing halt when the Lilithians discovered what was going on here and realized, oh crap, we better do another great reset, because they've started mixing with the humans again and making them more conscious, and we don't want to do that. We don't want any new chosen species, especially not any new hominid ones, because that was the final species of the first round of the game, when God was almighty. Okay? They didn't want to go past that. They wanted to basically keep heaven the way it was, run by an almighty God that was on autopilot, so they could pretty much do whatever they wanted in heaven. Was kind of their idea of heaven at the point. Which kind of brings to mind some of what's going on today with the anti-God, New Agers and atheists that are saying, wow, we don't need God, we don't need anything but what we want. So this was when a new bunch of characters came into play. These were not gods per se, but these were hive queen drones. Still controlled ultimately by the Spider Queen, but the Spider Queen didn't come to the planet personally. The Spider Queen, or whatever the current incarnation of Lilith was, because Lilith was not actually any of these. Lilith was a shapeshifter, was one of the old gods who could basically take any shape they wanted, could pretend to be any creature they wanted, could mate with any creature they wanted. So this hive queen sent a bunch of stand-ins, if you will, a hive-minded creature that didn't have a lot of spiritual power, but had a lot of physical strength. And in the male side or in the female side, they were basically very seductive. They were beautiful. They had the ability to enchant. And they also had, the females had the ability, like hive mind descendants of a hive mind queen would, who's shape-shifting, they could shape-shift too. And so this was the species called asuras in Hindu mythology, who came and screwed up the age of the old gods, the devas, and had this great war on earth. And Hindus are still conflicted about it today. Some will worship Kali and Shiva, who are destroyers, they are adversary gods, and others worship Krishna, Vishnu, or on the side of Brahma, or don't realize that Brahma is actually God, was actually the Brahma bull, who was one of the major incarnations of God. So this Spider Queen army, which included the legend of the Scorpion King that you hear about in Egyptian mythology, basically was responsible for wiping out this great age of the therianthropes and turning humanity against their own creators, their own gods, which is a repeating theme that the adversary uses. It takes the teaching of a prophet, of an incarnation of God, and turns it against God's own people, to the point that they actually sacrifice their own Messiah. It's happened again and again. This is part of the Messiah pattern. And so this era was basically marked by shapeshifters who said, no, we're not going to go with the hive mind queen. We're going to go our own way. To leave the hive mind, though, they had to become non-shape. They had to give up some of their capabilities. And this is where we get partially shape-shifting species that depend on feeding on flesh, feeding on blood. This is when the vampires came into being, the werewolves, so forth. Zombie characters who eat rotting flesh and so forth. So this was the price that had to be paid to free the planet from the influence of the Lilithians. And this is why I say there's a karmic price for everything. Each version of God has been punished to split off from the Lilithian yoke, if you will. The next age was the first scientific age, and this is basically the Atlantean age. Here, the therianthropes had pretty much gone, and we were basically dealing with the Elohim and Devas and the Asuras, and these shapeshifters that were still hiding out and becoming under the influence of evil again, under the influence of the adversary. So there was a flowering of civilization. This is the Atlantean age. A lot of science, but eventually the capital, the Atlantis, everybody wanted to rebel against because they weren't sharing all their secrets, and they were becoming corrupt and evil. That led to God version 7, who is basically the god of the the golden age, the feminine age that people look back, oh, wasn't that wonderful? Everything was so wonderful under that version of God. This was a God that was basically, okay, I'm through fighting with Lilith. I'm going to just play that game. And I'm going to become the king, the leader of the shapeshifters. And just try to please everybody by basically instituting anybody can do anything, do what you want, we don't have any laws. And this is the time during which humanity got their second evolution. They got turned into the Cro-Magnon man, which is the source for all anatomically modern humans. If you look at the fossil record, there is no predecessor to Cro-Magnon man. The whole out of Africa nonsense is complete bunk. Just because there were hominids in Africa earlier does not mean that's where humanity came from. It's nonsense, and I encourage you to go visit some of the excellent content on Robert Sepper's page, his channel. He's a very, very accomplished evolutionary anthropologist. Cultural anthropologist, I guess you call him. Anyway, his channel is a very good source of information to debunk the out of Africa nonsense. And it is nonsense. It is basically part of the woke cult Marxist agenda to discredit everything Western and to rewrite history to make black power the only power that's respected, to make female power the only power that's respected, completely turning everything around, which is an agenda of the adversary, to keep moving things back and forth, and you're seeing the cycle even starting again now with, okay, people waking up to the woke cult and saying, whoa, I didn't sign up for this trans weirdos in women's bathrooms. I didn't sign up for them playing women's sports. And now you're seeing a backlash. And people say, oh, that's great, we're going to go backward. No, that's not how it works. Creation constantly moves forward. If you ever try to reset the dial, you're going to lose something. Things have already been lost, and if this anti-woke cult becomes as powerful as the woke cult was, they're going to be canceling other culture. And not all of it is bad. And this shifting between developing and canceling culture has been happening a long time. We don't want to destroy anything. Destroying stuff so you can build back better is stupid. It's dumb creation. If you can't take what exists and build on it, have babies without throwing, and only throw out the bathwater, not the babies too, you're not a very good creator. You don't deserve to be a parent of anything. Okay, so, moving on from that, then we have the era of the Greek pantheon. This would be after the flood. And this is kind of an anti-science age. Oh, we remember there was all this crap that destroyed the time before Atlantis. So we don't want to go back there. We're just going to retreat to our old ideas of God. But those old gods were no longer around. They were worshipped. The stories were still being told, but due to the previous battles, every time there's one of these cycles, a new version of karma gets implemented. Because while God is being trained up, karma is being refined. And that is the secret of what was going on here and why God agreed to incarnate, because he knew that while he was waking up, karma would be here in a position where, basically is going to be the judge of this whole thing. Lucifer is going to be testing, and Lilith's going to be trying to tear apart every soul that comes around and turn them into a stock character, part of the board, or pull them into, basically different groups. Okay, so at this point, the God's influence was around. You could be inspired by a God, and it's possible that you could be a descendant of a certain God. The DNA patterns were there. And this is when humanity became the chosen species, right after this second evolution of humanity. Not immediately, but during this time, when the adversary launched another attack against the new chosen species, the defense was basically organized around another chosen species that kind of knew what the adversary was up to. This time it was the adversary coming at them with high-tech shapeshifters, robotic shapeshifters, using holographic technology. And that plan was thwarted during this time by basically the last non-human Christ, incarnation of God, the centaur Chiron, which is where the Chi-Rho symbols comes from. This is why Cairo is called Cairo, and it's in Egypt. Okay, this is what was obliterated as the Serapis cult, the cult of the bull, that recognized that there were many past incarnations of God in tauran species. The centaur was not actually half horse, that would have been a centihippus. It was a half bull. And they demonized this half bull character by turning him into the Minotaur. And in fact, he was imprisoned in Crete and was until basically somebody came and killed him, and then they pretended like the killers were the heroes. Oh, you saved us from the horrible monster that was eating our children. Well, no, actually what was going on there is the Cretan culture was one of these satanic cultures that actually practiced human sacrifice. They didn't feed the Minotaur, the people. That was a story to demonize the centaurs and to get humans to turn against the very species that came to warn them from Alpha Centauri about the coming invasion of the Lilithian robot people. Complicated. So basically, this era was more or less characterized by, it wasn't a complete reset. This agenda was exposed, and what ended up happening is that the bull tribe, and if you will note, the tribe of Dan is known for particular reverence for bull. At least the tribe of Dan that comes from the Scandinavian areas, that's where we get the the idea of Vikings wearing helmets with horns, and we have a bull worshiping culture in much of Western Europe. That's because they were the ones that caused the Bronze Age collapse, which you would think is a bad thing, but actually was a good thing, because the Bronze Age civilizations were being basically turned into hive minds again. One by one, the old empires were being invaded, their royal families, as it were being invaded and taken over by hive mind shapeshifters. And that's been happening again lately. There are a lot of people in our government that are not human. All governments, in big companies too. And if you're good at spotting such characters, you will have some suspicion that they aren't. When they start, especially when their programming starts breaking down, and you get a clown like Mitch McConnell going in the middle of a press conference or something like that. More and more of that is going to be happening, in fact, as the influence of the programmers of this bunch, which are hive mind again, they've left the Earth. They're now on the moon. That's why everybody's so interested in going to the moon right now. These other planets all have their own groups of competing characters on them that are interested in what's going on here. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just wanted to then go back to the story of the Garden of Eden. So basically the symbolism, the pattern of the Garden of Eden has repeated many times. It's basically it's a pattern that repeats with each new chosen species. They will rise up because of some pressure of the adversary. They will develop a number of messiahs. Generally, their first messiah will be a conquering one that establishes them or their people as the chosen ones. They will have some cultural messiahs, and then they will decline and eventually have their sacrificial messiah, which signals the end of that messianic age, that chosen people. And it started with species, and now we're on to a particular species, Homo sapiens sapiens. And there have been many chosen people. There have been a number of Gardens of Eden. The one that is described in the Bible, interestingly enough, is not in the Middle East, where people think it is. It's actually in this area right around here between Java and the Philippines. That's where the human Garden of Eden was. That's where the first humanity developed. It was basically engineered there. The first version engineered by reptilians, which if you look back 65 plus million years ago, the continents look quite a bit different, right? We're getting back to the era of Gondwana land, where all the continents were more or less joined together. And so, the first Garden of Eden is really kind of hard to spot right now. There's been so much continental drift and subduction and so forth that who knows where that's at. But the second version, the second evolution of humanity happened when this Lemurian species, who was created as a slave species, was upgraded, and that happened in and around the Philippines and or Indonesia. Now, the reason for a lot of this symbolism is, well, in fact, the Bible does, although it doesn't mention Lilith as Adam's first wife, it very clearly indicates that there were people before Adam. Eve was not the first woman. Can't have been, because there were already tribes and things being talked of before then. Doesn't make any sense. And some people say that, oh, well, the Bible has two creation stories. Well, in a way, that's kind of true. There were two phases of creation. There was one that made this slave species that was controlled through mind control. That may have seemed pretty idyllic. You live in the Garden of Eden, you pick fruit and stuff, and when, you know, the gods want to control you, they just take over your mind and make you want to do things for them. That might be some people's idea of heaven. And that's why there's so many people that support the Orwellian mind control agenda of the elite. That's so many people that support the communist globalist ideal of, well, they're all little children. We have to tell them what to do and when to do it and how to do it, and we'll program their minds every day through their smartphones so they will know what we want of them. And we can control how they reproduce, whether they want to reproduce, whether they can reproduce, what they can eat, when they can eat it, and we'll all be just happy. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. This is the World Economic Forum's agenda. They're not making any secret of it. They want to turn humanity back into a hive mind. And eventually what that is going to do is going to basically ensure that only elite females get to reproduce. Those elite females will be the most beautiful, the most talented, the most wonderful celebrities that get the most coverage, and they'll be the only ones that anybody wants to have children with. Everybody's going to want to have children with them, even if they're not women. Even if they're not men. So you're going to have a lot of women wanting to get sex changes, thinking that they might be able to have a relationship. And well, they can't have any children, can they? So the only ones that will reproduce are the ones that still maintain their normal sexual preference, which will be encouraged, is already being encouraged by the way the elite, the real elite, raise their children. They know that what they're doing to the average person on this country is absolute bullshit. It's programming. It's horrible programming that's causing them to self-extinct. Because they don't want any of them around. They just want to have their elite few. Their agenda, their 2050 agenda, is to reduce the world population to 500 million. And they're already well on their way with the reduction in birth rates, the deaths from the pandemic and the vaccines, and all of the other contaminants they've been putting in stuff. I'll tell you a little story that might get me in trouble, but I think it's time to tell it. I was on the way back from Shanghai once when I was on expat assignment there. And this was after I'd become an actor, and I was a pretty talkative fellow. I happened to strike up a conversation with the businessman that was on that flight. We had a good discussion, really hit it off, and talked through the whole flight, didn't even sleep a wink. Towards the end of the flight, he leaned over to me in kind of a hushed voice and says, "You know what? I've got to tell you something. I've got to get something off my chest. And you got to promise you're not going to tell anybody else." but I just have to tell somebody, and it feels like it needs to be you. He leaned over and he told me the Chinese government is engineering rice to lower reproductive rates. They're genetically modifying rice to cause reduced birth rates. And this was back in the early 90s, I think it was. Or what, let's see, no, it would have been early 2000s. While the one-child policy was still going hot and heavy, and you know, the World Economic Forum was beating the drum of we gotta reduce population, we've got to control climate, blah 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 blah. Yeah. So basically, I haven't eaten much rice since then. I don't feel safe eating rice. I don't feel safe eating most of the GMO products that they put out, because I don't trust what companies are doing in their GMO programs. This fake meat that Bull Goats is so heavily invested in, I wouldn't trust it. There's a lot of fakery coming out of China now. They're talking about how they're faking all kinds of meat, and you know, basically putting coloring and injecting artificial looking fats into it, so it looks like it's got this nice marbled look of high-end beef, the Wagyu beef that's so popular in Japan. There's some really evil people in the corporate world doing evil anti-creative things that are destroying the species. And we've got to stop that. They are trying to ensure that there won't be a Garden of Eden here again. They may not realize they're doing that, and that's part of the problem, is that our species have become so specialized. Every scientist, every engineer, every focus you can have in a job is so narrow-mindedly looking at one particular aspect of making a product, or selling a product, or designing a product, marketing it. They don't see the big picture, and they are being used thereby to do a lot of evil. Many of the CEOs involved in this don't even know that they're doing it, because they are being manipulated. This is how mind manipulation works. Our civilization has been programmed more intensively for the last 150 years than ever before, with the advent of cheap printing, with the advent of radio, with the advent of TV, with the advent of cable, smartphones I like to call them, and streaming technology and so forth. This is programming. They were honest about it, you know, back in the old days. And now we return to your favorite program. Remember the old style announcers? They didn't make any. They didn't even try to hide it, which is, I think, well, kind of how they were trying to avoid karma. By telling you up front, they think that, oh, well, they're choosing it of their own free will. I'm sorry, that doesn't really wash it. That's not really telling them the truth. That's not a way to avoid karma. If you're playing that game as one of the adversaries' minions here, you're not going to fool karma. You're going to get marked as a beast, and when you die, and you will, you ain't going to have a very good afterlife. At any rate, this is another thing. I mean, I talked before about the Gog and Magog prophecy, the Revelations prophecy. This is another reason not to get so crazy about what's going on in the Middle East. It doesn't have to be that way. That prophecy is a psyop. Listen to people that have studied prophecy and have said, you know what? Pretty much everything that was in the Bible already came true. From the standpoint of the people that lived in that time, it already came true. Even Revelations already came true. To the extent that it was going to. And this is why you need to understand that prophecy is essentially like seeing in the future, seeing in the past, remote viewing. The thing about it is that you don't know what universe you're remote viewing in, what version of time-space you are remote viewing in. You may be seeing a vision from, like Ezekiel did, of the old version of heaven, which is not the way it works anymore. You may be seeing a vision of an Eden that's not the one that you're really going to get, which is, something that really clouds the minds of many of the New Age culters who think that, oh, this new earth, everybody's going to get to do whatever they want. Everybody's going to be whatever sex they want. Everybody's going to be whatever race they want. Everybody's going to be furries, and we're all going to be happy, 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 and living in the land of Oz. That may be some space-time in some spiritual universe that caters to that kind of soul. It's not going to be how this universe is. This is a testing universe. This is a universe that rewards people who face their test, who accept, okay, I'm in this body. I'm never going to look better than this. I can put lipstick on this pig all I want. I'm still going to look like this same old pig you see in the screen in front of you. It's going to get old. It's going to die. I got to watch my diet or I'm going to get fat. I've got to watch what substances I use or I'm going to get addicted. That's not changing in this universe. If you think you're going to go to some new earth where everybody's going to be happy, 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 you're probably going to be going to a hive mind afterlife. Because this is basically how hive minds milk spiritual energy. They, like I was talking about in the first version of humanity, the first Garden of Eden, wherever it was, when the reptilians fiddled with the DNA of the hominids they found on this planet to give them enough intelligence to be servants, slaves. They let's see, where did I lost my train of thought there? Whoa, just went out of my mind. At any rate, this is what they want to do again. The adversary is not the little nasty man in the red suit with the pointy horns. That is a caricature. It's actually a caricature that was invented to demonize the bull, to demonize the Brahma, to demonize the Tauran species that have been one of the keystones to getting humanity where it is. The Taurus constellation is a very important one. The age of Taurus was where the baton was passed down from the centaurs to humanity, saying, man, I'm the last centaur, and I know we're on a hunted list. I'm going to teach you what I know about what's going on in this game, and hopefully your species will survive. Because the centaurs didn't even know what this Messiah stuff was all about. This Chiron, he wasn't completely wakened up. He was not a fully awakened Messiah. There was another Taurian before that who had been instrumental in the age of mammals, had been a chosen species of the Therianthrope age that moved the story along through a particular messianic period. But that was it. They were wiped out. And that's the whole idea of the adversary, is to the adversary wins if they wipe out all of the intelligent non-hive mind species, enslave them. That's what they want to do right now. We can't let them do that. And the Messiah's not going to come riding in on the white horse and shine in heaven and solve all your problems for you. That's not how it works. God gave you a system that allows you to become messiahs, that gives you the roles that are necessary to make it happen. There is a capital M Messiah in this special period we're in right now, and that capital M Messiah has already done his job. He's woken up. He's figured the game out. He's told everybody what he had to tell. And it's up to you now what you do with that knowledge. Whether you play on the side of the adversary and we just need peace. Anybody who can give me security, I will worship them. Come on, bull goats, give me more technology. Come on. I want more social media. I want something even better than TikTok or Instagram. If that's the route you want to go down, if you want to live like a vegetable and keep getting dumber and dumber and dumber, and our species has been devolving for the last 100 years. If you look at education systems, if you look at the quality of character of people from 100 years ago to now, we are devolving. We're moving backward. Our technology may be moving forward, but it's actually the reason we're being dumbed down. And this is why, again, I showed you what the new city of God looks like. It doesn't look like the future, because the future is very in this universe. Be a God. See where technology as a crutch breaks down and doesn't use technology that way, doesn't allow it to be used that way. Okay? If you want to let technology run your life, you're not going to be one of the humans that is going anywhere in the future in this universe. You're going to be one of the ones that stays on Earth and maybe gets enslaved. That's not going to be the ones that are going to be out exploring the stars. That's not going to be the ones that are attending Starfleet Academy or whatever, or be chosen to be part of a galactic community. Could be that humanity will
make you happy, and you'll own nothing.
That's an outcome that can happen. Doesn't have to happen, but it's not up to God. It's up to you. Even Lucifer doesn't really care much because humanity is not his chosen species. Lucifer's got his own agenda in this. And ultimately, he's been playing the game long enough that his goal is basically to retire, just like God. Lucifer doesn't get to retire until all the adversaries are kicked out of his universe. So he's going to be on the side of whoever is driving the hive minds away. Isn't going well, he'll work through other species. And they will get souls with human experience, so they will get this new version of karma. They will get all the latest programming, soul programming, without humanity surviving. So don't expect Lucifer to save you either. Don't expect karma to save you, because karma has an agenda in all this. Karma wants to retire too. Karma gets to retire when a new version, even a minor version of karma, comes out. And the minor versions of karma require a new version of God. We're now in a space-time that has no beginning, no end, no limits. The further out we look with any telescope, the further we travel with whatever spacecraft we develop or whatever warp drives or whatever technology we come up with, we're not going to find any boundaries. We're going to see that, gee, there's always more beyond that. That's what's going to make this next era of incarnation in Lucifer's testing universe more fun. We're not going to keep dwelling on this center point, but the center point will be important to karma, because that's where this planet, from about the late 1800s to now roughly, are when is basically karmically the most difficult time to be incarnated. The most difficult species. So many temptations, so little knowledge and capability, but basically knowledge that increases the temptation. So these 3 generations are what karma cares about, playing them over and over and over until it spits out a new and better version of God. And as I told you, in this scenario, this midpoint of time, many every time we run this scenario. And whenever one succeeds in a way better than the last one, however karma measures that, which may not be just based upon what the Messiah character does, but what all the other characters in this special messianic time do. When karma decides that, oh, okay, we had a successful Messiah and all of these other things happened better than what was happening the last time we promoted a new minor version of God, then that's when I get to evolve too. And that's mostly what they do. They can just hang out with their family. That's probably what karma wants to do, is to just, you know what, when I retire, I just want to hang out with the souls that I love the most. And I don't want to see any of you other bastards again. That's how I would feel if I was karma. That's kind of how God is, too. Only God is less focused on family and more focused on friends of a similar nature. And God, being a typical American male, making more sons of God. What happens to the daughters of God? They usually just want to stay in heaven. It's great there. Why would you want to leave? If you're already a female in heaven and every guy you look at is a god who's going to have wonderful children with you and get to go to the best schools ever, experience the best culture ever, the healthiest, happiest, homiest culture, why would you ever want to incarnate? Unless you happen to be very inclined to want to pursue some particular mission outside of having a family, which many women do. So daughters of God, daughters of the high, because of ambition, because of particular passions or goals, that's okay. It's not just the sons of God that come and incarnate and impregnate the daughters of men. A lot of what those women in heaven want to do is become men, because they've never known, if they were born in heaven in this magical culture, they've never known what it was like to be a man. Well, a lot of them are curious. That's one of the reasons right now that there are so many gender curious people, because they have incarnated, and some of them actually came from this new heaven. In fact, they were planned there if they were special characters that had to happen in this. Be there because on Tuesday last week, the Messiah went out to dinner at a certain restaurant and happened to run into some people on the way. Well, we need to make those important characters to make sure that it happens the way it happened in the plan. So a lot of you are here not knowing that you were created in heaven, in the highest heaven. But you'll get to know that again when you earn your way back there, because you don't just get to go back. Some characters do. But you have of myself, because the original always lives in your home universe, and every soul has their own home universe. Even if they're born in the highest heaven, that is not their heaven, it's God's heaven. They are children of God or gods. They can come back there, but that will be their family home, if you will, but it won't be their own universe. They will never have control of it unless they play the game enough times and well enough to get to play the Messiah. the next president of the highest heaven until a replacement is found. And it's not that much fun being the president up there. You have to attend all the Assembly of God meetings. You have to do all sorts of, things that presidents do here. Kissing babies, making babies, which you might get tired of after a while. Might not be your thing. But it's something that's important up there because we have to keep generating more souls from that magical universe of the highest heaven, because that's what generates the patterns for new versions of creation. Little tweaks, if you will be tested there through the interactions of the characters in their highest heavenly incarnation that are then played out in Lucifer's universe to see if it converges on something that is a better version of the Messiah than was before, however karma wants to measure it. This is how it works. It's a system that works. It doesn't need any major changes. It will take any number of minor changes because creation is never perfect. There's never going to be exactly the perfect universe for every character until they advance to the highest levels. Or gets to create a shared universe where everyone wants to be there. Anyone who doesn't want to be there, okay, go make your own. That's perfection. Perfection is not one. It's not force one dog food on everybody. That's stupid. Anybody who believes that some almighty creator or source or one that tells everybody to do exactly this and only this, I don't know. You're on some kind of weird drugs if you believe that. Or you just haven't thought it out very well. Subscribe. Till next time, this is the Omnist Hour with Rob Trump. Happy Karma.